Hello.
Hey,
Hello, you three.
good.
Long time no see, actually. I've actually seen all of you in the last month. It's kind of been very cool. Can you hear me okay? Yes. You guys don't look super happy today. Is everything okay? Narelle, are you good? Happy? Sophia's happy. She's always happy. Michael, half happy. It's good to see you guys. So I don't know, Melissa, if I need to wait a few more minutes or if I need to just start. What do you want to do? Want to wait a few more minutes or should we just get going?
We can just start, yeah.
All right, let's start. Thank you guys for coming today. It's very cool. And I hope that you learned something different today. Let me just open my presentation. Right. So today we're talking mostly around teams and reading teams and stuff like that. So let me share my screen. You recording, Melissa? Definitely. Okay. All right. So you guys can see my screen? Yes? Happy? Just yell at me if my internet wobbles. Melissa already said she'd let me know. I don't know why it's a bit wobbly today. Maybe it's the amazing sunshine I've got here. You never know. You never know. So today we're going to talk about a little bit more of an advanced space in wealth dynamics, the wealth spectrum, and wealth vectors. I know that Narelle, you and Michael have done this before. Sophia, you might not have. So I'm going to tie through some concepts of how I'm doing some things with teams, so that it does help you to assess. Look, if it doesn't sit with you, then don't use it. But you also need to decide how you want to be using the content, Roger's content, that's kind of stuff, so that you can use it for teams. So today is really about how do I work with a group of people using wealth dynamics, because like we know, the you guys know me, so you don't need to see that. But the point around it is an individual debrief is really like the first thing, yes. And then once you start taking that to the next level, you start looking at it a bigger space. And this is really where the performance consultant training does help. And so, Michael, you and Narelle have done it. Sophia, I know you haven't. But the point is this is going to kind of tie it to see if it is useful for you to use it on a bigger scale for one to many. Yeah. And so for me, it's really around, looking at team energies, looking at different patterns, warning systems. Then how do we facilitate that debrief? And then how do we get that flow back into a team? So we're going to do some practical examples. And also, I've given Melissa some downloads that I've asked her to send to you guys afterwards so that you've got the information, because I'm only going to cover some things today. Okay, cool. Right. So the biggest thing here, when I come to a space, most of the time, teams don't fail generally because of talent. People have a lot of talent in their teams. Yeah, they hire people generally who've got a lot of talent. The point is within the teams, the problems come in from the wrong bums in seats. So they put somebody, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but often when they put up a spec for a job, they're asking for characteristics that have got dynamo, blaze, tempo, steel, and spirit, and you've got to be all of these things, right? So a lot of organizations tend to hire, their hiring process is firstly not ideal because it's asking for energies in all the spaces. Now, sorry, guys, I'm presuming you know energies, dynamo, blaze, tempo, steel, you know what the strengths are. I don't want to cover that, right? So I'm going to presume you guys know all of that. If you have a question, just ping me, yes? But when they hire, they tend to put a space together that says, I need somebody who has all of these traits, which is a challenge because then what happens is the wrong person goes into the wrong seat. Then the communication stops. You've got bottlenecks in the founders with the communication. Resentment can build, accountability becomes weak, things like that. Definitely not looking at energy strengths, then the trust starts breaking down. So it's it's complete chaos in a system when things, when they go wrong, they go badly wrong in a team, right? Generally. And I don't know if you found that, but I tend to find that. And it starts in the recruiting space. So when you're working as a flow or a performance consultant, really, it's about understanding, it's not really, your job isn't really when you're coming in as a consultant to motivate the people. You're pretty much there to understand what's going on. Yeah. So what's happening? Why is it happening? What needs to change? How and when do we restore that momentum? So this goes back to that whole wealth dynamics flow. Yeah, using the different energies and picking it up together so that you're looking at it from an outside picture. And Roger often talks about that helicopter view. You're that helicopter, right? Where you're coming in and you're actually checking everything out in that space. So I tend to use these questions, like what's happening? Why is it happening? But there's also, guys, wealth dynamics is amazing for one spot, but you've also got to use your own skills, your own intuition. You've got to feel the room. I can't teach you to do that. Yes. You guys have got to be bringing out your amazingness in this. And my best advice in this is not to think too much, actually start feeling, right? Because your thinking tends to stop the picking up of the different frequencies. So you guys know the four energies, you know the core things here. You also know this, right? So remember these things. I'm just going to put it up here. It is in the slides for later, but which profiles, how do they exhibit trust? How do they exhibit flow? These are important things to remember when you're working with a team because you're bringing it back, right? So if I'm working with a blaze, right, I know that they build their trust through communicating. Yes. I know that they need respect to get into flow. If I'm working with a steel person, I know that their trust is built through measurements and they get into flow by being organized and disciplined. Just remember these things because you've got to overlay this into your conversations with people and understand where they're coming from, right? Because remember, as a consultant, your main job is to come from a spirit perspective, actually, right? You're coming from that space. It's a neutral space. Yes, it's not charged with any of the others. It doesn't matter what your profile is, right? It matters that you're in that neutral space so that you can identify the different flows. Make sense? Yes? You can always stop me and tell me I'm talking crap, but yeah. So you guys know this already. The four energies, they all have different forces, right? So you've got your dynamo, which is your vision, your big pictures, your innovations, your blaze, which is more influence, people, relationships. Sometimes sales can come in any area. I did put it there because often the starting of the conversation comes from a blaze perspective. Tempo is your delivery, your support, your nurturing. Your steel is your detail, your control, or something. So every team has got to have a balance in these kind of spaces because we know that when you don't have energy in some of these areas, it affects different aspects. So now, when I look at leadership, because leadership is one of the important parts when you're working with a team, who's leading these teams? What energy do they have? Yeah. Where do they sit? Yeah. And I think, when we're taking a look at the styles of leadership, it's interesting because I always take a look at like what my style of leadership is and how can I be better, for example. And so when I'm working with a team, I know that I mix the task-based with the data because I'm a mechanic, right? So my natural focus is to pick on those two, yes. But I have to learn that also as a leader, I sometimes have to go into spirit so that I can attract and work with the people in the blaze and the tempo spaces. So leadership, remember, I don't know, I think Narelle, you did the course with me with Inspired Leadership, with that course we did a couple of years ago, when basically it was around, the comments were leadership is actually an honor. To be a leader, it's something, it's not just a given, it's actually a huge responsibility. So when you're a leader, your natural state is going to come into some of these, right? Obviously, like I look at myself and we've got that, task and data. But again, I cannot be a leader that's only coming from that perspective. I've got to go more into spirit and I've got to go into that space. But when you're working with a leader from a particular business, sometimes they don't get that, right? So that's where your consulting or your coaching can come in from a leadership perspective, because it'll filter down to the team. And if the leader is completely activities based, which I've had one leader in my life, like it was always about activity. And now you can see it's an opposite, right? I'm a mechanic, I'm task-based, data-based. You're asking me for activities, what the hell, right? So when you're working as a team member, your natural thing is, all right, I'm best at giving this, right? Or leading my team like this. And now my leader, that saying you've got to manage upwards. Yes. You've got to learn what your leader wants. And now you've got to do different things. So this is where, as a consultant, you're teaching the leadership and you're teaching the teams to manage these processes and learn about the different things. So you've got your task, your people, your activities, and your data. And like I say, it's not always easy for leaders to, if they're not into wealth dynamics or talent dynamics, they don't always get that you have to get into a bit of a spirit space with it, they're not really like, yeah. So, yeah, Sophia, great question. A task and activity. A task is like, do this. Go and give me 10 things that look like this, or complete the task of finishing the presentation. Or it's very task-based. Activity is more like, it's a softer wording. So it's like, what's happening with the team? What is everybody doing? Do you see the word? It's like they come into, what is their activity? Like in the team we've got, what are the salespeople actually doing every day? Whereas a dynamo, a task is the sales team are getting numbers, going meeting 10 people. They've got 6 appointments. They've got that going. So do you see the wording is different? So when you've got somebody who's a tempo leader, or, who's coming from activities, they generally go, what's everyone doing? Not like, hey, they're doing this. You see the difference in the wording. Yeah. So it's mostly a wording exercise. And it gets, possibly question versus instruction, definitely, or more like nurturing. I think everybody, I used to remember this leader that I had, it was very annoying actually. It was, well, just let everybody, settle into their, into the day, and then they'll get going and they'll have their coffee. It's very like not organized. Sometimes it's not organized. It's too much love. And, from a dynamo space, I go, oh my God, that's so slow, right? But it's more slow. It's like everyone's got their things to do, right? So it's not always the questions. It's not always that. It's also that, the actual practical, what happens in a team environment. And you must remember, it's different nowadays because you've got some businesses are very much on the ground, yeah, and they've still got that actual kitchen with a coffee shop, or something like that. Whereas a lot of teams are online now. So this is a big wording difference, because these guys are going to say, well, what's everybody doing all day? Yes. Does it make sense? So it's like, I know I'm sounding a bit vague, right, in a way. But I also give tasks, yes. And tasks are very, but activities can also be a little bit softer. It's not as driven, like I find that's the difference. Yeah. In a lot of space, it's the drive or the different form of the energy, right? Because dynamo is very much quick, go, that up there, right? And if you've got blaze in it, then it's just fiery, right? But if you've got the tempo, it's a slow, it's a gentle, it's like nurturing. Come, what's everyone doing today? Let's get everybody to go to lunch, for example, and connect, yes? And have a nice time and that kind of stuff. So you'll find the leadership is different when it's, it's different when it comes from the point of activities and what's happening on the ground and actually in an office versus what's actually happening online. So you've also got to take that into account. Does that make sense? So play with this, take a look at it, play with it. Michael, I know you do a lot of these things, but it does, it's not something that's a rule book that you can just go, this is the rule. You've got to test it, and you've got to take your energy into account. But this is just a guideline also, because sometimes you've got someone like Narelle, for example, you're very people-based, but you can also be very task-based. I know, right? You're like, I'm not getting this. This is, do you know what I'm saying? Even though you're in that space. So just take a look, and this is an acknowledgement of the different leaders, also. Yeah, definitely. Nurses 100% are like this. Nurses, anybody in the healthcare industry, what I've found, healthcare, veterinary, generally very activities based. Yes, and it's very much about keeping the rhythm and keeping the continuity and keeping everyone happy and nurtured. Yes. So no style is better or worse, right? But it's about acknowledging when you're working with a business where they're at and what their leaders are doing, because that affects the team. Yeah, make sense? Should we move on? All right. So this you guys have seen before. I've just put it a little bit more in notes for you to highlight it out. Getting things done, leading best when holding others responsible. The blaze is more keeping a strong relation, encouraging and motivation. The tempo, more the activity, and everybody on track. You can see and hear the data, managing measures and metrics and things like that, right? So this just gives you a bit of a summary, Sophia. I think also from your style, you can have a look at that. I think we covered it. And then, guys, again, this is an important part to remember, because often teams are structured where you've got a leadership, then you've got middle management, then you've got bottom end, right? So when I tend to do this, I tend to look at the balance between the leadership team as well, right? So the 1, 2, 3 principle, to start a business. We've heard this, yes? If I'm a creator, I need a supporter and accumulator around me, right? Why? Because I need the energies of the whole thing, right? I need the energies of all areas to have a successful business. So when you've got a leadership team, often what happens is the team and the people, the leaders, the team, everybody is in one particular place. Why? Because when they're recruiting, the person who's responsible for the recruiting hires the people who've got the same energy as them. You see, you've already got your problem. Yeah. So most of the business problems come down into the easy fix. I find is if you can fix on the recruitment side, you can fix the teams better. Right. So when I'm working in a consulting space with bigger organizations, I start at the recruiting space. Who are you recruiting? Right. Or who are you shortlisting? Because your people are going to hire the people that resonate with their energy. I mean, one of the companies that I was working with, they just hired for a marketing position, right? And the person doing the interviewing, is a supporter, right? But this person they were looking at hiring is actually a creator. So there's a mix there and it works, right? But if I had to get the supporter hiring an accumulator, we've got problems because he's like so annoyed at the accumulator's energy, he can't actually hire correctly, right? So also this comes into leadership and growth and, where are the middle management at? Do they need, coaching on how to hire better? Is it a hiring point, having a panel? I always suggest my companies that I work with put a panel together of different energies, right? Because that helps, right? Because then you've got the frequencies who are interviewing for different things. So when I look at the team, I look at the leadership, the upper management, who is in the upper management that's actually making the business whole. So I look at this principle there. I look at it in middle management, and then I look at it again, in who's the actual team. Because, for example, if I've got a tech team, I know that it's going to be heavy on this side, right? On the, the mechanic, the load, the accumulator side. But I also know that the tech team is going to need somebody to manage the conversations with the clients, for example, and do things, have a bit of a relationship, keeping people together. So I know that we're going to need to have a bit of a supporter there. So when I do the team dynamical, graphical, or whatever you want to call it, it's going to be really interesting because I'm going to have it heavy on the one side, but I know that I'm going to have some energy in the other space to balance it out. So if I have a sales team and they're all sitting on this side, I know I'm going to need an accumulator or a load because I need somebody to track the data on the back because these guys don't do data tracking well, Do you see? So this is when I'm looking at the teams and how I'm balancing that out when I'm working within the business, right? Does it make sense? Yeah? Okay. So let me move on. You guys are aware of this. I don't need to cover that, but it's just a nice, like, a reminder. But now this is, how to read the room fast. Now, again, when you're going into a room and you're dealing with the stuff, I ask these questions or variations of these questions. Again, I go into more spirit than actually logical thinking, and I watch the people. So, guys, this is an important part when you're consulting, because you've got to feel your stuff. You've got to feel your people. You got to come from that energy. You can't be too what do I call it? Too structured and too rigid in this process, because humans are humans, right? They've also had behavioral things happen to them. They've had many experiences. And sometimes when you're in a room, you don't always know these things, yeah, unless it obviously comes out. So who's dominating discussions? Who's withdrawing? Who's sitting in the corner? Where are the delays? Where are the blocks in how people are communicating? Where is there some tension happening in the use of words, right? Who's really making the decisions? What words are they actually using? What energy is missing? Yeah. So this is where I come from, and I go and I just like, for me, it's listening to hear, and listening to hear to come from a sign of can that be solved, instead of listening to answer people at this moment. Does that make sense? So listening to hear what's going on in the room, and watching those signals, because a dynamo is going to look up, a blaze is going to do blah, 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 right? The tempo is going to speak slow. The steel's just going to have no like human human things going on. They're just going to go, I want this, and this should not like this. So you need to be filtering through the noise. And so I find these questions are the easiest. There are obviously more, but this is a starting point. And you guys have seen these things many forms before, but I've put a bit of a cheat together for you. You guys are more experienced, so you already know these things subconsciously, but it might help and just remind you a little bit. So recognizing the dynamos, what you'll notice, what they dislike. So you can see these things popping up, right? Which is kind of interesting. They get impatient in repetition, right? So if you ask the same question 3 times in a different way, the dynamo is going to go, oh my God, right? So impatience, you'll see that coming through. So even if you're working a room and you haven't managed to profile everybody, or, these are the tips and tools to use when you don't know everybody, you haven't profiled them yet. But sometimes remember, it's happened to me a couple of times in my career where I've profiled and I've met the person. I'm like, no, it's off. They did the profile and it's happened a few times, and it's the wrong. I don't know why they answered the questions as they answered them, but it wasn't who they were. And I go back into, again, the natural state. Remember, because people sometimes answer questions if they've been programmed too much. They're not in their natural energy. They're being pushed into something, or they're in a role they're not liking. They think you need an answer. Human beings are human beings, right? So take this as a nice guideline, even if you have profiled, because sometimes I realize the profiles are like, maybe this is not you. And then I'll call it. I'll say, ask these questions, tell me about yourself. And then I watch them and listen and things like that, right? Sometimes 100%. Hello, Jane. Good to see you. Or good, not, well, see you, hear you. I know you haven't got your camera on, but all the same. So this is kind of very interesting for me, because I like to check out what's going on in the actual profiles. What happens is then, we've done this before, where what do I do to reprogram, reassess somebody in this space? For me, I go and I tell them to monitor their energy. I do different things, and I see and I ask the questions, and then I'll only reprofile them like after 3 months, because if you profile too quickly, you also the likelihood of them remembering the questions is a challenge. Yeah, and you don't want that. So this is I've got for your tempos, what you'll notice, what they may dislike, right? So watch the room in this space. I kind of like that part because it's yeah, interesting. And you know, one thing they always do is the questions that these guys sometimes ask us, how's it going to affect the team? How's it going to affect my people? When is this going to happen? You can see I put the question at the bottom. I think I did the same on the Dynamo for you guys here. What's possible? What's next? They're very quick. You see that question I put on the bottom. Blazers, yeah. Blazers are often, I find, the easiest to recognize, I think. Maybe it's because it's my opposite, you know, and it's a mirror in a way in some spaces. But this is good. You know, like if the room is too cold, that's the easiest thing. Oh my God, this room is cold. Yeah. Because they don't do the freezingness. I remember I had a guy I was working for in the insurance, and his office was always at a temperature of like between 12 and 15 degrees. And even as a mechanic, I hated that. That was like way too cold, dude. I don't want to go into your office. I don't want to go into your space. Anyway, so these are interesting components. And these guys are, it's more the people side, right? Everything around the people, who's involved, who do we know, they're building rapport quickly. You'll just sometimes, the thing with blazers is you often just notice their energy precedes them in the room, right? Generally, I find. I know, guys, this is generalizing stuff at the moment, but yeah, it's just a nice cheat sheet, I think. Okay, recognize the steal. The steal is steal the steals. You should recognize them. They don't like vague answers. Poor planning, chaos. He's annoyed. They like often ask the questions, how does this work? What are the facts? Yes, they need accuracy. So this is a nice cheat in how you're actually working with them, right? Okay, so I'm going to pause for a moment. Any questions, guys? I know we've been popping into the chat. Anybody have any questions? Anybody want to unmute and ask anything? Are we good? Good? Noddings of heads are good. Thumbs up. Nice. All right. Okay. So let's move on. This part is interesting for me because every strength that every profile has, this has got a back in shadow. Yes. Now, this comes back into your own personal energies. And when you're working with leaders and when you're working with teams, when they're not in their proper strength or their proper energy, yeah, you've got the shadow side that comes out. And often, you know, guys, we're all human, so we do have our shadows come out. Believe it or not, we're not all so amazing all the time. We would love to be. However, we do have these things. So shadows can come across in chaos. It can come across in ego coming out, you know, avoiding things, you know, the shiftiness, hesitation, also, you know, like emotional, like the shadows, like emotion, the blame, those things can also, I haven't put all of them on here, but you guys, if you've been working with teams, you can see the shadow side coming out. This is why, for me, it's really important to watch the team and watch what they're doing, because you'll see their shadows coming out, because that's what humans do. We can't be perfect all the time. And when the moons change position, for example, we know things are going to happen, right? Or at the moment, like we're in a month, like thank goodness it's coming to the end of April, but like all the planets were moving. So everybody was feeling everything in a different format. And these kind of things come out, right? Paralysis, you know, overthinking. They're not necessarily, the shadow is not necessarily like, I'm not going to say it's a bad thing, guys, because I don't like to think things as a bad or a good. It's a yin and a yang. It's an up and a down. We all have it. Sometimes we all overthink, or we all have analysis paralysis. You know, we get into these moments, but be recognizing the shadows that come through from the different teams, you know, because this is then how you can support the facilitation of the change, you know, and especially in the leadership space, you know, with the leaders. Often the shadows have an impact in the team, right? The team has got their own shadows, obviously, and their behavioral traits and things that come out, because sometimes, I'm going to bring this up now, but, you know, when you're working with teams, you've also got the spectrum, remember? the wealth spectrum, where you're going from your infrared, your red, your orange, your yellow, your green, your blue, right? Now, as a leader or someone in a business, generally, that's why it's also important from a recruitment point of view, who's recruiting. Because if you've got somebody who's at a red level recruiting, they're only going to recruit people at the same or below themselves, right? So if you in this business or with that you're working with, or the leader is only a yellow, you're only going to recruit yellow, baby yellow, or orange, right? That's what you're going to recruit. Your energies is what's going to recruit. So careful on who's doing the recruiting. They need to have a higher frequency. They need to be higher at what they're doing, right? It's difficult in some of the businesses that you have, because there's also guys, for me, it's the wealth spectrum is their energies, but it's also their ability of their wealth, how much wealth they're holding. I talk about that a lot. And if they're not ready to go to those things and let go of the different sectors to get to the top, that's the work in itself also as a consultant, going and working in with a leader. Sometimes the entry into the business comes from, oh, my team's not productive, they're not doing stuff, there's no money, there's no sales. The natural surface level problems are what comes up first. And then when you go in deeper and you start seeing the things, you'll see what the problems are. And sometimes it is a point that the person recruiting is actually a red, infrared. So again, when you're recruiting sales positions, if you've got a guy who's infrared head of sales, you've got a problem in your business, because he doesn't even believe he can hold money. How's that going to make the business hold money, right? I mean, somebody was saying to me also, like, in my businesses with the marketing and the stuff like that, like holding the space for, if I've got a content creator who's creating stuff where I'm wanting sales to happen and they're infrared, how's that going to put the energy into what I'm creating? So I listen to these things also. And I think keep that in mind when you're working with teams, because it is something that I find pulls through a lot. It's not something that doesn't. Yeah. It's kind of, yeah. Sometimes it's more alive than other times, but I do find that it's there. Yeah. All right. So this is also something interesting, which I put here, because often you have the bottleneck of the founders, right? Or when you were, it's the founder, it's the CEO, sometimes the COO, that kind of stuff. And I put these down because this is very real. This is a challenge when you're working, they often are the problem in the business, right? So from a founder point of view, too many ideas, they're not finishing anything. They're pushing the team too hard, and they're not balancing out their profiles, with the wings on the sides. Yeah. Stars, the brand, supporters, they're more one harmony and nice things happening versus accountability. These are just little things I've put together. It's not the only rule, but it's something to think about, and I want you to be aware when you're working with founders, because often the founder's the problem. When you take the founder out of the spot and then you work with the team, the leadership team, they actually start performing better. One of the companies I work with, he's very high dynamo. He's like, why can't this get done now? I'm like, dude, relax. You go do that. Let's take that off your plate and go over there. These are the conversations that when you're working within the business and you start getting this right, it actually helps a lot. I'm not saying, you have different founders in different spaces, but yeah, this is just, like I said, a guideline. Lords definitely control and that rigidity, mechanics, sometimes they keep so much time fixing things that they forget to scale. Yeah. So these are just guidelines for you to take a look at, because they are traps that come into play, and it's definitely about being aware of the founders' energies and their positives and ups and downs. I know, positive, negative, yin, yang, right, wrong, whatever. There's always the two polarities that you're looking for, because when you understand the polarities, then you're able to change the frequency. You can work with that to make it different. So this is just like signals, when you can spot things. This is just like I've put these here, but guys, you will know as you're working through this: morale, blame, exhausted people, low productivity, no money, tensions in the communications. Everybody's busy, but they're not doing anything. Yeah, there's this disengagement. Meetings are not structured, and there's nothing happening at the end of the meeting, and people meet for the sake of meeting. These are basics, yes. But often, when we are doing this, it's important, again, that's what I'm saying, going into spirit, because when you go into spirit, instead of staying in your own frequency, you can see these a little bit easier within the business. You can see what's happening. Why is this working like this? Why is this not working like this? Make sense? Yeah. So yeah, there are probably many more you can add to the list. Anyway, so here for me, what I generally do is I kind of read, then I reveal what's missing. Then I take a look at the team, realign them into the right positions. Because for me, it's not about getting rid of people per se. I don't like that word. I think everybody's got a really good strength. Obviously, companies do need to do whatever they do. But when I'm working with a team, my first spot is not to get rid of people. My spot is, how do we put them into the right place? Yes, and realign the right energies into the right things. Then we rebuild the trust with everybody's right profiles, and then the flow starts happening. So this is just like a little 5-step thing. And then here, this is, you guys have seen this before. What are the right seats? Obviously, there's variations in this. Guys, this is not an extensive and only list. Please, anybody can do anything. We do know that, because we don't put people into boxes. The point around it is that, where can that energy come from quicker to get that change happening that you want in the business? Is it better to have the person in that particular role or in a different role? Sometimes you end up having a role that's not linked to this. So guys, like I say, you just have to work with it. And sometimes the change cannot be immediate. You can't say, oh, you're going from sales and you're going into HR because that's your profile. That's like a shock to the system. So you've also got to work towards, with a training program, with what are we teaching the team, how are we moving them towards the right energies and the right frequencies. And sometimes you don't change the role. Sometimes it's a different thing. But this is a guideline, again. And I think the big point is when I work with teams, it's about getting the team, as everybody together, taking responsibility. That's where you get the right energies and you reactivate everybody in their right frequencies, and then they all want to work towards the same point. But guys, the first part behind this is, obviously there's got to be a very clear why in the organization, right? The company's got to know where they're going. The leaders have got to be very clear in their communication. What are the goals? What's the vision? You guys have seen those slides before, but this is really around, what's working, what's frustrating, what's not clear. It's like taking everything from airing under the carpet and putting it on the top, and then dealing with it to repair. And so, yeah, for me, the lens of great consulting or doing things really well is the profiling, the spectrum, and then also the vector cards. So I'm going to do a little bit now on the vectors. Melissa will drop you guys the cards and everything and the app. I'm not sure if it's still working or what's happening on that side, but I'll drop you the paperwork behind it, so you guys have got the documentation and you can at least work with that. But I tend to work with all of these, right? For me, it's not in isolation in one space. I look at all of the things together. So I think some of you have got vector cards, some of you don't know what they are. But ultimately, Melissa, did you have the app that you can drop into the chat? If the Wealth Dynamics app, I don't know if it's still activated, but those of you that have it, it's a very cool app to be able to look at the communication between different profiles and the energies and stuff like that. So the cards are really around based on words and what actions should be taken, what can be avoided, what are the key words to notice, and how, this is what you need to do, is how do I apply them practically? So for example, you'll get this, so don't worry. The point around this is I don't know if you guys ever watched that flow legacy, I think, micro degree, where it's got Peter Pan. Linda was asking me yesterday about that, but with Peter Pan being the creator, the movies behind the different profiles. I don't know if you guys remember that, but I love that explanation, and I use that a lot because it helps me relate to the people, because then they understand what they're going for. So your dynamo or your creator dynamo is your Peter Pan, right? So if you take a look at this, it's like the what is your call to adventure, from your ordinary to your extraordinary, then your who, which is your road of trials, and then your when, which is, the reward for overcoming, and then your how is the return, and then you've got your spirit at the top, right? The application and the raw sharing it with others and stuff like that. So this stuff is very, very cool. Melissa's dropped the app in. I believe it's still working, Melissa. So download it for sure, because it will help you while you're working with teams. But the point is there's also some things like this that gives you the different energies, the I Ching of the different cards. There's also some other cards in there around the different stages of business, which you can use. We'll do that as an exercise the next time. But the point is, let's do a little bit of an example. I think we've still got some time. So for example, we have a founder who's a star. We have a COO who's a lord. Sales aren't where they're supposed to be. Execution is slow. It's unproductive. Morale is slipping, right? So let's open this up. What's happening? What's missing? What do you think? You do know this is your time to speak, yes? I'm finished speaking now. Anybody want to give it a wang or like a thought? Maybe? Any ideas what's happening here? No grounding energy for sure, Jane, 100%. We've also got opposites, right? This is the most easiest logical thing. I've got someone who's in blaze energy, and I've got somebody who's in steel energy, and they rub each other off the wrong way. Why? Because fire burns steel. That's like the most obvious, yeah, for those of you that aren't performance consultants and haven't gone through this kind of training, right? Yes. So you've got opposites playing. Yeah, you've got opposites playing. Anything
so we're needing
else?
some tempo energy to get things done. So your stars out there, selling or promising or communicating, and you've got your Lord that's sort of counting and making sure things, are all adding up. But you've got no tempo tempo energy that's actually getting shit done.
Exactly, 100%. Also, the balance of how these guys talk to each other, right? Because that's also, if you're going to the vectors and stuff like that, there's also many other things underlying here. Like, guys, this is just a basic example, but I wanted you to think a little bit, right? Because nothing's wrong. It's not like any opinion that you've got here, that's not a right or a wrong, right, at the moment. This is just like for you guys to, start thinking about when you get this, right? 100%. Supporters are good with sales, but it's also the same blaze energy as a star. So the 1, 2, 3, the deal makers plus missing for sure, right? Well, generally what would happen also is that, the stars want to go really fast. They want speed, visibility, momentum. Yeah. Whereas the Lord is wanting control and certainty and structure. So now you've got this thing, and these guys have got to have a conversation. And sometimes you can't bring in a deal maker to help, or a tempo energy to help. Maybe you have to bring in your HR manager to facilitate, if she's the right energy, to ground the conversations. That could be a thing. But now, if we look at the vector cards, right, this is where your vector cards come in. And so if you take a look here, you've got the star versus the Lord, 2.7. So 2 is the star and 7 is the Lord. You've got relief, right? So when I look at this wording, relief, the star in relation to how it's dealing with the Lord is remain relaxed, unattached, right? Enabling problems to be solved. Because you see, that's a different energy for a star, right? To come in from a different perspective. So the action is to wait patiently, right? So the solutions, patiently await intricate solutions to address challenges. Sorry, my tongue got in the way. avoid becoming agitated or getting tangled, because stars tend to do that. They get impatient. And the key words, be relaxed, come to a point of solving something. You know, you guys can read the words, right? And then there's also an image, a prisoner in a bondage being released from a long-term restriction and hardship. Woo, that picture is interesting. Yes. The point is, can you see the difference here? Now, if a star sees this kind of way to deal with something, they go, maybe I should just calm my pant, right? Before I start freaking out and moving forward too quickly. If we take the opposite, which is the Lord to the star, which is 7.2, this is struggle. And you can see that because focus on a specific area of growth without the need to control it all, right? Because that's the control it all is the thing. So the action for the Lord would be to choose to contribute in an area of detail, you know, where there's uncertainty from the star, where the star doesn't know. Avoid trying to slow down events or focus on the negatives, because remember, Lord often has a glass half empty vibe around things. Yes. And then hardship, difficulty, you know, that kind of stuff. And your image is the new sapling going through the rocks, difficult situations. Yes. So this is what the cards do, guys. And so Melissa will drop these to you, all of you that have attended, the right documentation, so that you can go and play with this. I pretty much just did one example for you, but go and play with it, you know, please do. It's interesting and I like it. And if you do get a chance, maybe Melissa, that legacy micro degree, drop it to everybody as well, just to remind yourselves of the different, you know, the different stories relating to that hero's journey, which I think is quite cool when you're working with teams. And yeah, so for me, teams are designed. They're not, great teams are actually designed. Yes. You've got the right people, the right roles, the right stages, your flow comes back, and things work really well. So yeah, that's that part. And those of you that do know me, you know where to find me. Those that don't, I'll put it on the slides. But yes, that is pretty much where I am done chatting today. So I've tried to keep it short, sweet, to the point. So, because I know all of you guys doing performance consultants are busy, you're working a lot. You've got short pockets of time where you might need to go do something else or get 10 minutes back or anything like that. But I'm definitely here for any questions or any thoughts. And yeah, before we end, I'd love to hear from each one of you what your biggest takeaway was today. What was your aha moment? What did you learn? And yeah, so any questions? Pleasure, Jane. Pleasure, Tracy, of course. Questions, though, you guys have? Yes, Jane, I don't know how often you use those, but I mean, I've been bringing it more and more back in because I really actually remember how much I love them, you know? I really love the cards, and I love the way that when you're engaging with the team, you can get like a completely different thing. Pleasure, Natalia. Nice that you joined. I'm so glad. Good to see you. Melissa will drop the slides, so you guys will have it. So take a look and use it. No questions. Biggest takeaway is the founder bottleneck. Who knew? Who knew, Narelle? Of course. Founders are always interestingly on bottlenecks in some point in their lives. It's just that recognition of being a bottleneck. They don't really like that. True story. Interesting with the S. The what, Michael? Interesting with the S. I don't know what the S was, but I'm so glad it interested you. That's really good. Oh, strengths and shadows. Yes. Remember that, right? Because we sometimes forget. We're all focusing on all the ha-ha and the positives and the ups, but we do know that shadows appear. It's patience, love, kindness, guidance that changes that energy flow and that frequency. Yeah. Anything else? Hey, Saida, how are you? Good to see you on the call as well.
Well, thank you. I'm well, thank you. I was just writing in the chat, actually.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
you may as well, since you're speaking, you can speak. You don't have to write in the chat.
Exactly. No, I was just going to say I'm quite new to all of this and finding it a challenge, studying by myself. And if anyone else is new and wants an accountability partner, I think I'm a supporter anyway, so probably studying in isolation is hard for me. But if anybody's looking for an
Definitely.
accountability partner, do reach out. I'll be interested in working with someone. That's all I was going to say.
Of course. There
Oh,
we go. Natalia's
Natalia is
down.
saying I'm down. Yay!
Yes,
Awesome.
of course.
I'll get in
So,
touch
guys,
with Natalia.
I think the WhatsApp group is there. You guys can connect.
Okay.
Obviously, you can come and, many of us are all connected on LinkedIn or in Telegram. We do that a lot. I know you ladies, a lot of you guys are connected with me on Telegram. But yeah, I think it's great to have a network of people who are working with these kind of things and to share your knowledge and share your work and learn different things, because I think wealth dynamics is still one of my favorite tools of all time. Yeah, of all time, definitely one of those things. Yes, Trace.
I've had the vector cards for about 6 years, maybe more, and I've never known how to use them. So that was really good because I've looked at them and gone, oh, what does this how do you put it together? And you always sort of make things very easy. Like it's sort of like, how come I didn't work that out? The other thing I'll say is I do a lot of work with teams, of course, in my occupation, not so much that I've done the training around the team stuff. But I was like, oh my gosh, this is really good from what I do in my day to day, and joining that with wealth dynamics. So yeah, thank you. It was really, really helpful.
Definitely. I mean, this is the thing. I think one of I think for myself personally, as you expand from one-to-one to working with teams, I think performance consultant was something that I really applied. I went on the training, I used that because that definitely helps you understand how to use it, wealth dynamics, in a little bit of a bigger format. Yeah. Not just that individual space. If you can plan to do performance consultant sometime, in the next 12 months, I think it is a good thing, especially if you're working with consulting teams and you're doing that bigger work. So plan it, put it on that list of the things that you'd like to achieve, you know what I mean? And think about that, because it gives you a different dimension to how you offer the work for the companies that you're working in. It gives you a different scope, and if you use the stuff like I use it in a different way, like not always thinking it in the same block, it does change your value add to the corporate or the corporation or the business you're working with, because they actually go, oh my word, I didn't realize that. And the goal is that you take what you're doing and you add value to them, and that they can see that you've got something to offer them that's not just the standard. So you want to be lifting your game to a point where you're like, they want you. They're like, I need to pay this chick or this guy to come to do this for me because I don't know how this works, right? And when you create that right energy around what your offering is and how you're using the stuff, it's a really good thing, because it gives you a lot of doors. Because generally I find the door comes in to say, Michelle, I need executive coaching, or I need, my team's not kind of working well, or they're not doing a few things like this. It doesn't come in to say, hey, I've got problems as a founder, ever. They don't ever raise their hand and say, like the one client I've been working with for 2 years, only the last month he said, Michelle, I actually realized I'm the problem. You see? So it doesn't come, they don't put their hands up to say, I'm a problem and I need you to help me fix it. The problem comes through other entry points. And the more you have to add to your toolbox, the easier it is, easier it is to do that,
Michelle, exactly what you've said now is probably what I would have taken as my value takeaway, because I have when I host these brunches with the ladies and we speak, they have a great understanding of their own profile. What always comes to mind is all the other people that are messing things up for them, that they work for. And I haven't before had the language to explain this level. So normally I will speak to them about a debrief and go deeper into their profile and give them the flow plan and so on. But I love this level because it's given me so many ideas of ways to really go more deeply and to encourage them to bring the team in. I'm speaking one-to-one with them, but they work with other people. And yeah, I haven't really looked into it at that point, and I think I will be looking into it. And I didn't know there was an app or a vector card. So now I'm about to do some digging, maybe joining you, Saida and Natalia,
Well,
on
Melissa will send it to you guys. But
Mm,
remember the point is that, guys,
mm,
don't sidetrack your education pathway, right? I mean,
mm.
being a flow consultant is one thing, but if you're going to start working with teams, guys, do the right thing, be a performance consultant, get
Yeah,
the right
exactly.
level of knowledge, So, I mean, Melissa has got my link because apparently Duncan doesn't have a link anymore or something. So if you guys want to talk about performance consultant, to book a call and talk about that, you can definitely have a conversation with me around it. It's no problem. She'll put that into the email and you guys can have the thing. But I think don't short track your education if you're working with corporates, because you need to build up your skills. And one of the other skills you need to build up is the use of AI and how you're using AI and how you can help them in that space too. So I think, short tracking your own path is never a good idea. So if you don't understand something, rather ask the questions. And I think, Sophia, you've asked, the one thing I say about you is you ask a ton of questions, which is a blessing, because then you learn more and you build and build,
Yeah.
And that's the point. The point is you want to make yourself into something where your business is so strong, that people will ask you. And those entry points are going to come from weird places. And you're going to go, okay, sure, no problem. Of course I can help you there. But then you've got that opportunity when they trust you to go into so much more. I mean,
Maybe we'll have a call about the things that I'm doing, and perhaps there are other things that I don't know about that are offered that would be the best fit, because I don't want to go and work with teams in corporates in that way. That's not what I do. So
yes.
perhaps there's something else that works really well, and we'll talk about it separately. But great,
Yeah,
great,
of course.
loved it. Thank you.
Anytime. Thank you for your feedback. But yeah, guys, if you have any questions, please drop them. You guys know where to find me. I really appreciate that you came today, and it was so lovely to see all of you guys. And thank you so much for making the time to stay for the whole call. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.
Melissa,
Michelle.
just let me know if I must stay on. Bye, guys.
Thank you.